So before we reform the press, though, we want to be able to laugh at their corruption. And one of the really great things when the polls turn against the Democrats, the press gets so hysterical that they just absolutely drop any pretense of fairness. So here's like a New York Times tweet for a debate, a Wisconsin Senate debate between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes. This is the New York Times says, Senator Johnson, a leading peddler of misinformation, will debate the Lieutenant Governor Barnes, a liberal Democrat who has been touted as one of the party's rising stars. Can you if you look very carefully, you can detect just a slight bias. Even better was this guy, Chuck Johnson, who was at the first questioner at the Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp debate in Georgia. Here's Chuck Williams asking the first question.
Ms. Abrams, public opinion polls in our state show support for the right to abortion, Medicaid expansion, and banning assault weapons. You are on the side of public opinion in each of these issues, yet you are behind in almost every poll. Why?
Nothing biased about that. I love you so much, Stacey. Why don't people love you like I love you? What always gets me about this is that Republicans are never ready. They're never ready for the tough questions from utterly biased people. So, you get in, you're talking about abortion, and nobody ever in a debate turns to the Democrat and says, are you in favor of aborting a child because he has red hair but you wanted a black hair? Are you in favor of aborting a child because you wanted a girl and it's a boy? Are you in favor of aborting a child because he's going to be a Pisces and you wanted a Taurus? Nobody ever asks that. But what they say is, all right, a 12-year-old is raped by her father and now she's pregnant. Do you expect her to have that baby? And the GOP guy is always like, I don't know. I don't know what to do, because it's like they never rehearse. They never expect to be blindsided by the press, who is trying to destroy them. A very knowledgeable political insider once said to me, GOP will never win consistently until they realize they are running against the press. Well, that's what Donald Trump understood. Because when somebody asks you that question, a 12-year-old girl's been raped and now she's pregnant, the answer is, well, if you really have to kill that child, I'll trade you that child's life. If you want to kill it, if you want to kill that child, I will trade you that innocent child's life for all the others. Give me all the others, the 99.9%. And, you want to sacrifice the child on the altar of your abortion love. The big exception is this Carrie Lake. She is just amazing, running for governor of Arizona against Yellow Katie Hobbs. We have to call her Yellow Katie Hobbs because she won't debate Carrie. She's surrounded by a bunch of reporters who come after her because she supported Trump and Trump's, claim that the election was stolen from it. And they call her an election denier. And not only is she ready for the question, she's got a list of all the Democrats who have denied the results of an election. It's cut 7.
This is outright. Hillary Clinton. Trump is an illegitimate president. Is she an election denier? This one says, was the 2016 election legitimate? It now definitely is a question worth asking. That's the Los Angeles Times. So it's okay for Democrats to question elections, but it's not okay for Republicans. It's a crock of BS. Every one of you knows it. We have our freedom of speech, and we're not going to relinquish it to a bunch of fake news propagandists. If you want a copy of these, I'm sure that Anthony would help you get a copy and help you learn how to be journalists, but look it up.
So if you're into, female over male SM pornography, pretty good to watch her slap those guys around. But all it took was a little preparation, a little understanding that these people they're not the people's friend, they're not democracy's friend, they're not your friend, they're your enemy. So you got to know what they're going to, got to second guess them and come up with it. She had the paper right there on hand. I'm talking about this because Liz Truss, the temporary Prime Minister of England, she basically had time to walk across 10 Downing Street before they got rid of her. 6 weeks, and she resigned. And just to show you, I want to highlight, I love the Daily Wire, and I want to highlight our incredible coverage from the scene. We had a reporter right there on the scene, our own Michael Knowles, reporting from rainy London about this. Is cut 23.
Michael Knowles here. Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has just resigned after only 44 days. This makes her the shortest reigning prime minister in British history. And so, of course, the topic on everybody's mind is now, when will Franz, the Duke of Bavaria, finally land to mount the latest and final Jacobite rising? There is obviously a great opportunity here. King Charles has not yet been coronated, with the British government now in absolute disarray. This is the perfect moment for the exiled Liechtensteinian heirs to King James II finally to come back and take over what is rightfully theirs, the United Kingdom.
Michael Knowles reporting live from the 17th century. You don't get this coverage everywhere. Subscribe to the Daily Wire today. We don't just cover the world, we cover the generations. We can go anywhere. Here's Liz Truss announcing that she is leaving town.
I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week.
Now, this was because she put forward tax cuts, kind of Reagan-esque reforms, and the market and everybody just went insane and chased her out. Now, I just want to remind people, in case you don't remember, that Margaret Thatcher proposed similar kinds of reforms to the economy, 1981, and Margaret Thatcher, there were riots. There were literally riots in the street, and the press, the British media started to discuss the need for a policy U-turn. There was they wanted a policy U-turn, lots of pressure, riots, and Margaret Thatcher made a famous speech when she says, "U-turn if you want to, the ladies not for turning." That's a play on words from a famous play, 1948, called "The Ladies Not for Burning." That's leadership. That is leadership, and leadership, standing by your guns, making your decision ahead of time. It's always, every decision is two decisions, the decision and then the decision to stand by your decision. And Liz Truss did not make that decision. She started firing her aides, her ministers, and she just looked terrible. And she was just thrown out right away. And, it's an interesting thing. There was a recent piece in the New York Times, one of the actual few pieces in the New York Times, a former newspaper. And, I want to be fair to the New York Times. I only call them a former newspaper because they used to be a newspaper and they no longer are. But the New York Times ran a piece saying that mass protests, people pouring in the streets like they are in Iran, used to be a grave threat to even the fiercest autocrat, but they've plummeted in effectiveness, a study shows, and factors appear to include polarization, social media, and rising nationalist attitudes. Now, I think they threw in the rising nationalist attitudes because they just want to blame that for everything, but it is true that when you had that massive truckers protest in Canada, to protest, all the mandates and lockdowns from COVID, they were able to hurt them at the bank by taking their money away, blocking their access to funding because of their opinions, which here I think would run into constitutional trouble. But who knows how long the Constitution is just a piece of paper. It can't stand between us and this tyrannical government if the people are not willing to stand up against that government. But inflation is different. Inflation is different because inflation is what destroyed the Weimar Republic and brought Hitler to power. Inflation is that when, taxes are one thing because the people who get taxed are the upper middle class and the rich. The lower classes don't get taxed, so they don't care so much. But inflation is a tax on everybody, and it lands on everybody the same. And of course, it hurts the poor worst of all, because if everybody's getting taxed the same amount, then the poor are getting absolutely blasted. So inflation comes from one thing. It comes from government spending. It comes from government printing money. That is where inflation comes from. And the U.S. can get away with this to some degree because our currency is the currency of the world, right? So they can just print it to some degree, and it still remains good. It still remains good. But, Kevin Sorbo, the actor, tweeted the other day, if they can print it, why do I have to pay taxes? And everybody, yelled, oh, he's an actor, funny, and he played Tarzan. What is Kevin Sorbo is exactly right. Why can they tax us if they're just going to print the money? The money doesn't mean anything. And the only reason people don't catch on to that is because the world is trading in our dollars. But ultimately, when you spend too much, prices are going to go up. When you print too much money, prices are going to go up. and people are going to get ticked off and throw you out of office. So, what Liz Truss needs to do, what America needs to do, what our leaders need to do is they need to lead. And leading is not always doing what the people want you to do. See, what we have now is we have what our guest, Emily Finley, who wrote this book about democratism, which I just finished reading on the plane here, she says what they're doing is they're saying, well, democracy is the people doing what we want them to do, essentially. It's them following the general will, which we will decide. We will decide what that is. But that's not my point. My point is this. The people always want the same thing, which you can tell from California, where they do almost have democracy because almost every bill gets voted on by the people. The people want stuff and they don't want to pay for it. And that just is going to happen over and over again. They're going to say, give us this, we like this, you gave us this, and now we want to keep it, but we don't want our taxes to go up. And you can't do that. You cannot do that. Make them pay for it with their own money. If people who receive the benefit get taxed and don't feel like, oh, I'm stealing from Jeff Bezos, he'll never miss it, which is basically corrupting to the body politic. But if they think, oh, this is going to raise my taxes, but now everybody will have better health care, they won't do it so much. So that's how you lead. You make sure that people understand the consequences of their actions. But of course, that is not something politicians like because it gets them voted out of office. So Liz Truss, I think what the things that she wanted to do would have worked. But it doesn't matter if you don't stand up for it, and it doesn't matter if your economy is in the bag because you've been spending too much and you're just so far down the road that inflation is just going to go up and up and up. It's a very dangerous moment economically because America is probably protected because people use our currency, but Europe could actually collapse economically, and that is not a good thing for anybody. It's not going to be a good thing for anybody. Our elites need to be changed out, and hopefully that'll happen as the older people die off. But still, our elites need to be changed out. They have failed. They have failed at everything they do. Their brilliant ideas have failed. Their brilliant plans have failed. Their Green New Energy deal has failed. Everything they've done has failed. They need to be swept out of power. And I only hope we can do it at the polling booth, because if not, things are going to get very ugly. If this is the kind of content you lust for, like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.